Welcome to Reading the Gospels Together, and today, John chapter 20 and the resurrection of Jesus. The chapter begins in the dark, but the light of the resurrection is about to burst forth. So, the city has been shut down for the sacred Passover Sabbath. No work or travel could be done since sunset on Friday. Now it is early Sunday morning, and at the earliest possible moment, while it's still dark, Mary Magdalene makes her way to the tomb. She hasn't had the opportunity to properly grieve what were things happening at such a pace on Friday. And so she wants to be first on the scene. Now, rather than finding the tomb sealed by the large stone which blocks the entrance, protecting it from contamination, from unwanted visitors, and from scavenging wildlife, as well, the other Gospels tell us, from any disciples with big ideas, Mary is astonished to find the stone removed and the tomb empty. Running back to the upper room hideout, she bursts in with the news that they've taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they have put him. They have put. Who are they? Well, of course, Mary and the others don't know. They only know it wasn't them. Temple officials, Romans, perhaps the cemetery staff in response to what was a hasty and unauthorized burial. Well, Peter and John run for the tomb, John outpacing the older men. We're told he bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Remember, this is an eyewitness account. Notice how much attention is given to the details, such as who arrived first and the fact that John stands in the entryway but does not actually enter. These moments are locked in John's mind. Finally, Simon Peter puffs up, and typical of him, he barges right in. The linen which wrapped the body is laying there, as well as the headcloth, which is separate. Now, the custom back then was family mourners, when visiting the tomb, would remove the facial part of the headcloth for the first 3 or 4 days, after which it was then believed the soul would leave the body, the face would change, and the mourning period would shift into a different set of prayers. John again includes an eyewitness detail. The headcloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen, folded up. Why this detail? It is important. Had the empty tomb been the result of grave robbers or the cemetery staff moving the body to another location or the temple officials up to some mischief, well, the linens would have gone with the body, and such care would not have been taken with the headcloth. After a few moments, John himself joins Peter in the tomb. We read, he saw and believed. But believed what? That the body was gone? Or that Jesus was raised from the dead? This is complicated by the following line. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. But so what did John believe? Given that explanation, followed by the line they still didn't understand, I think John believed that the body was gone. But the full truth of the resurrection is yet to be revealed. The disciples, we're told, went back to their homes. Now, this line has always puzzled me. Went back to their homes. They're in Jerusalem. Now, I have assumed the disciples are staying together in the upper room where a few verses earlier, Mary found Peter and John. Had they simply been gathered there to make a pilgrimage together to grieve at the tomb as soon as it was light, but they were otherwise staying elsewhere in the city? But referring to the Greek text in which John wrote his gospel, it actually says the disciples went away again themselves. The word homes, oikia, is not actually in the text. The implication is that they went away separately, but not necessarily to different locations. One went and the other stayed behind a bit perhaps, and then they went back by themselves. What we know is that later Mary finds them all together again in one place, all the disciples. So I'm sticking with that. They went back to the upper room, which they'd rented for the entire Passover week, which is a 7-day celebration. Well, what about Mary Magdalene? She's returned to the tomb weeping, and she screws up the courage to look inside. Peter and John have gone. Mary's there by herself again. Picture an entranceway carved into the rock, 4 meters square, with a low entrance into the tomb itself. kind of a foyer to the tomb. To visit and pay your respects, you don't have to actually enter the tomb itself. If you wish to do so, you must move the stone from the door, either a large wheel-shaped rock, which can be rolled aside, or smaller plug-type stone, which is rolled there and then shoved inside. That fills the small entrance door to the tomb. There are examples of both types in the area. Either way, it requires considerable effort to gain entrance. In the tomb, there's a bench upon which the body is laid, also carved out of the rock. There was considerable excitement recently when this very bench was found intact when the building which now surrounds the remains of the tomb, called the Edicule in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, was being repaired. Well, what Mary actually sees is a surprise. Earlier, she had only seen that the stone had been removed and glanced within only enough to see that the body was gone. Now, however, two angels are seated there inside the tomb on the bench, dressed in white. They ask her, "Why are you crying?" Not realizing that they're angels, you have to put glowing humans with giant wings out of your head and substitute two men dressed in white, which is more frequently how they're described in the New Testament. Mary only realizes later on, upon reflection, that they're angels. At this point, she just responds, "They've taken my Lord away and I don't know where they've put him." She still thinks there's an explanation for what has happened, an explanation which does not include Jesus being raised from the dead or come back to life. She's looking for an explanation as to where the dead body of Jesus has been taken. Now, famously, turning from the interior of the tomb, she sees a man standing outside. John quite specifically says, "At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus." Notice how John repeats the name twice. She saw Jesus standing there, didn't realize it was Jesus. There's no mistaking who this is, despite Mary's failure to recognize Jesus. We'll address this lack of recognition issue in chapter 21. Repeating the angel's question, Jesus asks, "Woman, why are you crying?" and adds, "Who is it that you're looking for?" In the other Gospels, it's the angel or the angels who ask this question. Why are you crying? Who are you looking for? Here it is Jesus. It's an odd question, but it certainly builds the drama. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I will get him." Mary is still thinking this is some kind of horrible administrative mistake. She's hoping to make it right. She's certainly not in any way expecting Jesus to be alive. But he is. And it's when he says her name and she turns to face him fully, she realizes it is him. She cries out, "Rabboni," which John helpfully translates as teacher. Jesus then says, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father," clearly implying that Mary had embraced him and was not about to let him go this time. Jesus assures her that he's really there. She need not worry that he will immediately disappear. He is not yet to ascend to the Father. There's another interesting way to read this passage. Back to the Greek word used for hold, touch, or cling to. It could be read that Mary was naturally wondering and concerned as to whether Jesus was real or if she was seeing a vision or a ghost. Reaches out and, is it real? Is it him? Jesus tells her that she had no need to ensure that Jesus was actually a body, a corporeal person. He's not a spirit or some other incorporeal form. He's not a vision. He is real. He's not yet ascended to the Father. He's every bit as much flesh and bone as ever he was. There's no need for Mary to keep trying to find that out. Now Jesus tells Mary, rather than hang on to him, she should go instead to my brothers and tell them, "I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." My Father, your Father, my God, your God. The wording is important. We now have the same relationship with God that Jesus does. God is our Father and our God. Any barrier between ourselves and God has been broken down by the power of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. My Father and your Father, my God, your God. It's one of the climactic sentences in the whole of the Gospel of John. Now, Mary of Magdala, we read, went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he said these things to her. She doubtless also told them that it was a real Jesus that she saw, not a ghost or a vision. You know, it's amazing as we reflect on this chapter that Peter and John, the big disciples, they left the tomb in wonder, confusion, and concern. We're told that John believed, but we're not sure what. But Mary leaves having encountered Jesus, entrusted with the proclamation of the resurrection. She's the one who's actually going to tell the apostles, the disciples, the big news: Jesus is raised. It'll be the end of that wonderful day when finally the disciples get their chance to meet with Jesus. But for that, we have to wait for next time when we read the second half of John 20 verses 19 to 31. We will see you then.